Thank you all for being here today. You probably noticed a tent in the parking lot. It's pretty hard to miss it. But we had our first wedding since the pandemic. We had it yesterday. It was a Romanian wedding, very wonderful wedding, with a reception and everything just like normal. It was Abbot was the bride. She's the daughter of Romanian immigrants, Norbert and Simona Metz, and she married Evan McKenzie, who is a former Roman Catholic who, of his own volition, wanted to become Orthodox. And so he also served as a groom, and then his family were all here also. For those of you who received our newsletter on June 25th, you know that we're back to fairly normal now with our lunches, worshiping back indoors. Again, I wish to inform you that the California and county health authorities no longer require that vaccinated people wear face masks or maintain social distancing, but that they expect unvaccinated people to wear the masks indoors and to maintain social distancing for their own safety, especially with the new variants coming out, the Delta variant. I read just yesterday that there were 1,000 cases a day now in Los Angeles County, but they're all among the unvaccinated. So please be careful. Also, 2 weeks from today, we'll be having the monastic tonsure of Brother Lubomir as Rossifort monk, Father Clement, and that will take place after liturgy 2 weeks from today. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, Amen. Also, one last announcement. We invite you all to stay for our traditional agape luncheon, potluck luncheon that we used to have before the pandemic, and we resumed as of two weeks ago. So please stay afterwards if you'd like to spend some time at the monastery. In the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, Amen. Today, we commemorated St. Olga, the grandmother of St. Vladimir of Kiev, who's called equal to the apostles. Not only Vladimir is called that, but his grandmother is called that, Olga. I'm not going to talk about her today. I would like to, but her life is fascinating and full of twists and turns and lots of interesting things, and I just didn't have time to prepare a talk, but I will one day. But I would like to talk about a saint we commemorated yesterday, who's no less important in the history of Orthodox Christianity. I'm talking about St. Anthony of the Kiev Caves, Monastery in Kiev. This is not Anthony the Great in Egypt, father of all monks, but someone named for him, who is considered the founder of monasticism in Rus. Rus is the ancient name for all the lands of the people of Rus, which today would encompass Ukraine, Russia, and Belarus. And he was born in the year 983 in Lubech, not far from Chernigov. And his name at baptism was Antipas. This is around the time that Rus was first accepting baptism on a large scale. Christianity had already made inroads among the Rus people at several times in history before this. But we're talking right at the time when there were mass baptisms of the whole Rus people throughout the lands of Rus. And he possessed a fear of God from his youth, and he longed to embrace the monastic life. And when he reached maturity, he was no longer a child. He wandered until he finally ended up on the holy mountain of Athos in Greece. This is the end of the 10th century. And the Rusicon and the monastery of St. Panteleimon that got established there, the Russian monastery of Athos, was just starting out. And here he received the monastic tonsure. And the young monk pleased God in every aspect of his spiritual struggles on the path of virtue. He particularly excelled in humility and obedience, so that all the monks rejoiced to see his holy life. But the igumen, the abbot, under whose spiritual care he was, saw in Anthony a great future ascetic, and inspired by God, he sent him back to his native land, saying, Anthony, it's time for you to guide others in holiness. Return to your own land of Rus, and be an example for others. And may the blessing of the holy mountain be with you. So he returned to the land of Rus, and Anthony began to make the rounds of the few monasteries that existed already, mostly founded by Greeks, Greek missionaries. But nowhere did he find that style of life, of strict asceticism that he'd experienced on Mount Athos. So through the providence of God, Anthony came to the hills of Kiev by the banks of the river Dnieper. And it was a forested area near the village of Berestovo. It reminded him of Mount Athos, the holy mountain. While there he found a cave, which had been dug out by a priest monk named Ilario, who later became the Metropolitan of Kiev and was canonized as a saint after his death, and he's commemorated on October 21st. So he liked that spot, this cave that Ilario had dug. And he prayed with tears, Lord, let the blessing of Mount Athos be upon this spot, and strengthen me to remain here. And he began to struggle in prayer, fasting, vigil, and physical labor. Every other day, or every third day, he would eat only dry bread and a little water. Sometimes he did not eat for a whole week, they say. People began to come to the ascetic for his blessing and counsel, and some decided to remain with the saint. Among Anthony's first disciples were Saint Nikon, who's commemorated on March 23rd, who later would tonsure Saint Theodosius of the caves, Theodosi, who's commemorated on May 3rd. And he was tonsured in the year 1032. While Anthony is considered the father of monasticism in Rus, he's really the father of what's called eremitic monasticism, or life as a hermit. It was Theodosius, his disciple, who established monasticism in community, in a monastery as we know it. I just want to say a few words about Theodosius, because it's hard to think of Anthony without Theodosius, or Theodosius without Anthony. And there's even a feast day for the two of them together in the fall. Theodosius, whose name means gift of God, had parents who were Christian, which was unusual that early in the history of Rus. And they gave him an education primarily based on Holy Scripture. And they were astonished to see his heart so completely overtaken by love for God. Theodosius' father died when he was only 13, and this caused the boy to retreat still further from the world. His parents were nobles, but he gave away his good clothes, preferring to dress like a poor peasant, and found pleasure in helping the peasants with their work. He often went to church, and when he learned that divine liturgy was sometimes not celebrated due to a lack of a prosphora, he undertook to bake the prosphora himself, so the priest could have liturgy. His mother loved him dearly, but she did not share her son's life-encompassing Christian outlook. She was very conscious of her social standing as a noble, and felt that by engaging in such lowly occupations, Theodosius brought shame on the family. So she tried cajoling the young man, then threatening and even physically beating him, trying to make him change his ways but Theodosius stood firmly on the path of the gospel commandments. His zeal for the things of God inspired Theodosius one day to run away from home, to slip away with a band of pilgrims bound for the Holy Land. It took his mother 3 days to track him down, and when she caught up with him, she berated the pilgrims for having taken her boy along and dragged Theodosius home, where she kept him in chains from that day forward to keep him from running away to become a monk. The humility of the youth and the sufferings he endured at the hands of his mother came to the attention of the local governor, who requested that the youth attend him in church. This served to calm down the domestic drama, but Theodosius' heart yearned for a more concentrated spiritual atmosphere and for the monastic life. And standing in church one day, he was struck by the words of the gospel, "Whoever loves father or mother more than me is not worthy of me." So with fixed resolve, he took advantage of his mother's departure one day into the country when she left for a few days to set out for Kiev. And he set out, taking with him nothing but some bread for the road. He went to the monks in some of the established monasteries, but they turned him away because he had no money to help to pay for his upkeep. Because they asked for such that the young man wouldn't be a burden on the monastery. But then he heard about the righteous Anthony. So he came to Antony's cave, and Theodosius fell to his knees and begged the holy ascetic to accept him as a disciple. Anthony said, "My son, you see my cave. It's cramped, it's damp, and it's dismal. I fear you won't endure the difficulties of life here." But Theodosius replied, "O blessed Father, please know that God himself has led me to your holiness, that I might find salvation. I'll do everything and anything you ask me to do." So the blessed Anthony foresaw his future greatness and accepted that he turn an aspirant as a novice. He later bade the priest monk Nikon to tonsure him a monk, and Theodosius was only 23 years old at the time. It was a few more years before his distraught mother finally discovered her son's whereabouts and came to him. And with great reluctance, Theodosius went out to meet her. At first, she vowed that she would die if he didn't return home with her. But gradually God softened her heart, and she came to see the wisdom of her son's patient admonitions. So following his advice, she entered a convent of St. Nicholas in Kiev, where she ended her days in peace as a nun. The virtuous life of St. Anthony illumined the lands of Rus with the beauty of monasticism. St. Anthony lovingly received those who yearned for the monastic life, and after instructing them how to follow Christ, he asked St. Nikon to tonsure them. When 12 disciples had gathered around St. Anthony, the brethren dug a large cave and built a church and cells for the monks within it. And after he appointed the Abbot Varlam to guide the brethren, St. Anthony withdrew from the monastery to live the life of a hermit again. He dug a new cave for himself, and there he hid himself. But then monks came to settle around him again. And afterwards the saint built a small wooden church in honor of the Dormition of the Mother of God, over what's now known as the Far Caves. At the insistence of the Prince of Kiev, Iziaslav, the Igumen Varlam withdrew to the Dmitriev Monastery, the monastery of St. Demetrius. And with the blessing of St. Anthony, and with the general agreement of the brethren, the meek and humble Theodosius was chosen to be the abbot, the igumen of the community. And thus it is that St. Anthony is regarded as the founder of eremitic monasticism in Rus, of life, the monastic life as hermits. But St. Theodosius is regarded as the founder of Cenobitic monasticism, or monastic life in community. And by this time, the Brotherhood already numbered 100 monks. The Grand Prince of Kiev, Vyacheslav, who died in 1078, gave the monks the hill on which the large church and cells were built, with a palisade all around, a wall. And thus the renowned monastery over the caves was established. The chronicler of the early chronicles of Rus described this monastery by saying that while there were many monasteries that were built by emperors and nobles and princes, they could not compare with those which were built with holy prayers and tears, by fasting and vigil, and by the hands of the monks. Although St. Anthony had no gold, he built a monastery which became the first true spiritual center of Rus. And for his holiness of life, God glorified St. Anthony with the gift of clairvoyance, being able to see the future, and wonder-working. During the construction of the Great Caves Church, the Most Holy Mother of God herself stood before him and St. Theodosius in the Blachernate Church of Constantinople. This church in Constantinople, next to an imperial palace, is where the robe of the Most Holy Mother of God was kept. There's even a feast day for it there. But they were miraculously transported there because they never left their monastery in Rus. But two angels appeared in Constantinople who looked like them. And on May 3rd, there's an account of the Kiev Caves icon of the Most Holy Mother of God, which recounts this miracle. And having received gold from the Mother of God, the saints commissioned master architects who came from Constantinople to the Russian land on the command of the Queen of Heaven to build the church at the Monastery of the Caves. This is the legend and the tradition. And during this appearance, the Mother of God foretold the impending falling asleep of St. Anthony, which occurred on July 10th, 1073. That's why he's commemorated yesterday. Both Anthony and Theodosius have their personal feast days. St. Anthony was yesterday, July 10th, St. Theodosius on May 3rd. But they're commemorated together on September 2nd as the founders of monasticism in Holy Rus. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.